Stumble forward, stumble forward. The 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 stumble.
I'd like to welcome Sarah Slean to the Stumble Forward. Sarah is a Juno and Gemini Award-nominated artist whose many artistic pursuits include songwriting, singing with orchestras, painting, film and television scoring, musical theater composition, broadcasting, string arranging, as well as her recent master's accomplishment, not to mention being a mother. I'm lucky to call Sarah a friend and collaborator. She's one of the smartest people I know and is somebody that can be relied upon for big thinking and deep internal self-exploration. Welcome, Sarah Slean.
Aw, Hawk, did you write that or did Jen write that?
I wrote that. What do you mean did Jen write that? I wrote that.
Hi, friend. What's up?
Well, you know, I'm excited to chat with you. I've been listening to you do other podcasts all morning, and here I am starting my own podcast called The Stumble Forward, and here you are on it. And thank you so much for doing it.
I'm stoked that you're doing this because I can't wait to hear these conversations.
Oh, Lord Almighty. Well, it's funny because I'm scared that you and I are going to start talking and that we're going to go into what we often do, which is that sort of brother-sister nickety-nackety thing that we do. But also, I think in listening to you on podcasts earlier today and kind of getting reinvested in the idea as Sarah Slean, not my pal, not my like familiar collaborator of 20 plus years, but somebody who I have some distance from and I can think of as an artist and somebody who I can remove myself and my own personal relationship to. And I think all we need to do is just sort of start into this and really just, all I got to do is remove myself, Slean.
No, I say dial up the Hawk. The more Hawk, the better.
Okay, well, let's just jump in because I did sort of list a wide-ranging variety of modalities that you're sort of involved in. So what are you doing today? What is it that's sort of consuming your time and energy? Like, what artistic pursuits are on the table for Sarah Slean at this given moment?
Oh my gosh, so much. And I, being a sort of self-directed, self-employed, freelance creative person, you always go through these seasons where you're like, oh my God. And you're looking at the vista and going, okay, what's next? And you don't know. And it's terrifying. And I've had lots of those seasons, but I have come into another beautiful swirling mass of a lot. And I love these seasons. And I just have to remind myself when the other season comes, like, these are cycles, these are seasons, just chill out. But right now, I am deep into the musical about Maud Lewis. The people who created the movie are creating a stage musical, and they have chosen me to write all the songs and all the music and basically do the score. So, and all the lyrics too, which is, this is the biggest.
This is songwriting from the ground up, really. Lyrics and music.
I feel like this is somewhere between film scoring and making an album. Right. It's in the middle. Like, so you're writing all the songs and like lyrics and music for the songs, but you're also doing interstitial, incidental music cues, essentially, and trying to weave all that together and reusing music here and refashioning it there. And my earliest experiences of music that were profound and really affected me were musical theater. Like, I think I saw Les Mis 8 times, Phantom several times. Like, I was obsessed as a child, as an 11-year-old. I was like, whoa, like, this is a whole other thing. I loved albums, I loved songs, and was drawn to it and was training classically and loved music, obviously, but seeing the theatrical production of something and being woven into a drama and becoming invested in that drama because of the music, that was a really formative experience for me. So this is pretty cool and full circle to be doing at this age, right? When I feel like it's the right time. I've made lots of records, written lots of songs, done lots of performing, done some film scoring now, and all of those skills kind of like pull together into this which is like it's just sort of a mixed bag of skills that you need. So
just real quick before we move on, okay, pause. We know there's more to come. This idea, you just said something that really interested me, which was about how as kids, we're really able to absorb musical theater. And as adults, I think the biggest complaint you get from adults is the heavy lifting of suspending disbelief. Like, oh God, here they are. They're about to sing and we were just hearing them talk. And like, for me, I've never been like, that to me has never been cumbersome to deal with. I've always loved musical theater, but I think of when you're a kid and your life is full of fantasy, the idea of suspending disbelief for people to go from singing back to talking and then back to singing again is totally nothing at all. So when we're kids, musical theater it's like children's music in a way, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, but then there's the added element of it's like you're taking the dial of emotions that are experienced, in regular life and turning them up to 35. Yeah. And for a kid, that's like, I imagine it'd be like an experience of taking drugs as an adult,
it's like a rush. Right? Yeah, it's amazing.
It's just it's so intense. It's so much bigger and more in full color than anything you've experienced. And I mean, that of course depends on your experience as a child. Like I had some pretty, intense experience as a kid, but nothing like, the drama in Les Miserables, for instance,
right.
Like chandeliers falling and all that shit, right? Like it was just like an experience of intensity that was like really completely married to music. So it really did imprint on me. So, this particular musical about Maud Lewis is much smaller in scale. The drama is nowhere near the grandeur of those big stage musicals. It's, very small cast, very small, like setting is rural Nova Scotia, like not tons is going on. She's in a cabin painting. That's pretty much the whole thing, the whole story. But, of course, things happen and there's the interpersonal dynamics that are really fascinating. But it's very small scale. It's a lot of intimacy. And then, so what I get to explore as a composer is what are these people feeling and what are they capable of expressing about that? Like, because they have very limited experience. They haven't traveled very much. They have small vocabularies, very little education, very little exposure to the world at large, but they're human. They have this palette that we all have. They have these weather systems inside that, ebb and flow and can reach peaks of intensity. And how would these individuals express that? And that's a real interesting, to me, super interesting problem solving task for a musician.
Oh, it's always abundance with you, Slean. Always.
Back at you, Hawk. This is why we still know each other.
I know. So, I know there's more to. I'm already digressing so heavily just based on this first question. We've only got to the first piece of the discussion on like what it is you're doing. I want to offer this a little bit too. This idea around musicals and intensity. So Jenny and I went to see Adam Agoyan's Salome back in the winter, and then we were just in Sicily and we saw another opera there in Palermo. And those are the only two operas I've ever seen. And it hit me hard. And of course, I'm jumping ahead. I'm assuming that we're both on board with connecting current like popular musical theater back to its origins of opera.
Hell yeah, absolutely. Okay. That link is completely valid.
Okay, thank you. People hate opera. That's sort of a given. And I walked into the Salome thing with a real open heart and open mind, and knowing that I didn't know exactly what I was going to see. There was an orchestra, there was actors, there was singing, all the elements. I knew basically, okay, I've seen these ingredients. We know kind of what this thing does. But it struck me how opera does not meet you halfway. Like, that's what hit me. I was like, oh, there's a reason why people don't like this, because you got to go to opera. It doesn't come to you. It's this melodramatic thing. It's almost opaque. It's like, you got to go reach it. It's not going to come tell you, oh, we've made some, we've acquiesced and we've made it easier for you to enter. It's like, absolutely not. This thing is a pain in the ass to involve yourself with. And now I understand it. But the payoff at the end was severe. Jenny and I floated out of center. And it's as we floated out of the Palermo Opera House, feeling like, holy, like, it also got me thinking that kids in France, Germany, Italy probably grow up learning how to appreciate that thing. And for me, I completely uneducated. It just hit me over the head. Like, it was like, okay, I'm seeing high art clearly.
Yep.
It's destroying me clearly. Like, I get, but I'm also understanding why this thing doesn't sell through to the mainstream because
hockey. Oh, I'm getting shivers. You're like, all the lights are on. The light bright is on.
Acting.
So this divide between low and high art has been such a theme in what I've studied for my master's, and also I just think about it a lot because I love equally things that have been placed, in my mind, somewhat arbitrarily on either side of that divide. I love opera. I love songs. I love musical theater. I love vaudeville. I love things that people consider so valueless in terms of like, is this art or is this entertainment, right? And I think the divide between high and low art, or trying to put, art versus entertainment over top of that dichotomy is a false dichotomy. And I think that it's, in my view, the difference between art and entertainment is actually not about genre, not about tools, materials, not about where it's happening, the venue. It's not about any of that. To me, it's about a philosophical divide. I think art pushes you deeper into life, and entertainment is a vacation from life. It is a pause. It's a respite. It's when we go where we go with entertainment, we're taking a break from the massive reality of life that must be reckoned with. And when we see art, we reckon with it, right? We're not escaping it. We're not running from it. We are, in a way, profoundly reckoning with it. And I think that can be a Joni Mitchell song. This is what I've learned by performing her music so regularly, is like, both sides now is a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece. It is a Vermeer. It is an opera. It is high art. And she contributed massively to the understanding of songwriting as something that could be in the realm of Picasso, of like making these songwriters. These are valid, deeply important artists, capital A, people taking us to life, not away from life. They're taking us to life, under the surface of things, to a more profound understanding of it. That's what her work does. That's why people cry when she sings. Like that to me is the divide. And that has nothing to do, like I said, with these superficial properties like genre, venue, any of those things. It has to do more with what I've just described.
It's so heavy, what you're saying. And this idea of high and low art is tricky, especially, from the North American palette. And maybe I get mildly defensive knowing that I just write 3.5-minute pop songs. But this idea of high and low art, I'll tell you again. So when we were in Sicily, we spent a day on the beach in Cefalù, and which is where all the that TV show that everybody loves, and that's why everybody goes to Sicily now. That's where all the beach scenes were shot. What's it called? It's about a hotel. You know what I mean? Anyway,
White Lotus, yes.
White Lotus, yeah. So we're on the beach in Cefalù, and we're enjoying our day. And then sort of like there's a party thing that starts up at an adjacent sort of club. It's down the beach, but the music just cranks up, and all of a sudden it's a dance club on the beach. Yeah. Now, it's not why we went to Cefalù. We went there to probably just enjoy the scenery and the quietude of being seaside and what have you. But all of a sudden, like, we're inundated with dance music, and there's a hype person hollering along with the music. And I'm there with a very erudite character, an old pal of mine who's a philosophy professor at the US. And we talked a lot about the high and low art, and about how, I mean, frankly, Europeans do high art great.
You do.
But there. Low art, leave that to the North Americans. Because when we were on this beach and being treated to a festival of just awful low art as given to us by the Sicilian DJ, I was like, man, oh man, it's so crazy that I was at an opera the day or two before and had been exposed to something so extraordinary. And the protocol of opera and going to an opera in Italy and
The
seeing
ritual of it. It's a ritual.
and people invested in that ritual in a way that I was very entertained and also humbled by. Like everybody around me, when the diva came out for her 16th bow with a fourth bouquet that had come from somewhere, people weeping, and I thought, man, this investment in this art form is beyond charming. It is
Sacred.
it's sacred, and it's evidence of a culture that appears to look like mine a little bit on the surface, but you only have to scratch a little bit to know, like, holy smokes, these people are nothing like me. They were raised with a value system that can't resemble mine. If they're taking
But
this,
that's because you are, sorry to interrupt, but that's because you are a child of North America. This is an infant country. We have no sense of the arc of our own history because our history was an abrupt colonialist horror. And it began anew, and it's nascent. It's literally hatching. Europe is so much older than we are, and they bring to that their appreciation of art, right? Because they have such a long history of art and art making and the evolution of it. There's that appreciation baked in, right? We don't have that yet.
well, and I would say this as well, like, because they're getting to enjoy the fruits of the colonial pursuits. So they've got all the wealth, and they've got 500 plus years of history of art making. Whereas we had to hit the ground running and get commercial right away. Like we had to get, like, came from Europe because we can't make money over there, or it's too expensive to live over there. We got to get here and start making us some money. And I think that's when when an artist is galvanized to get down to the business of getting commercial ASAP. I mean, it just changes your instincts.
100%. 100%. That's bang on. And think about the people that came here. The people that came here were iconoclast, entrepreneurial DIYers, right? They're not going to sit down and ponder the long history of music drama.
Right.
But at the same time, there's European ancestries here, but also think about the new art that has been born in North America alone. Jazz.
Yeah.
Rap. Hip hop. Like there's so much stuff that has been born here in such a short period of time. If you give that 500 years, right? Like amazing things will be happening. And especially with digital revolution and everything that's happening today, who knows? I mean, I used to be very, very pessimistic about the future of art in North America, and I've radically changed my tune.
Yeah, I've radically changed my tune on a lot of things in the direction of positivity and acceptance. But there's lots of stuff I'm still a real jerk about. And I think you and I have gone, like, behind closed doors, can be real jerks about stuff. I mean, quite frankly,
that's the best place to be a jerk, honestly.
One of the long lists of things I was wanting to chat to you about is I've really been thinking about this idea of content and content creators, which, of course, we're 20th century kids. And so this idea of large A artist or artiste, like, while I skated a little bit away from that as well, like, there is a sense that, I'm only writing 3.5-minute ditties, but it feels pretty important to me. And I do believe that I am an artist doing an artist's work, and I'm creating art. Fast forward to the 21st century, I feel like I lament the fact that, like, content used to be music, used to be play, used to be film. A musician is now a content creator. It's all just content and content creation. It's like I joke around the house that, my favorite content creators are the Beatles. It's like, but as soon as you put that paradox forward, or put this idea that the Beatles just created content, that's all it ever was, like, then you start to really, am I absorbing this idea of content and content creation? Have I swallowed that without really chewing on it to see really what it is? And I'm looking at the 21st century going, while I am with you, I've imbibed on a positivity that I'm not used to being invested in. But there are touchstones of modernity. I still go,
yeah, of course. That's completely natural. But, people in Beethoven's time would look at Beatles and be like, content creation. The Beatles are content creation, right? And now we look at the Beatles and be like, how did they write so many incredible songs? How, right? So I just think that our brains we just don't evolve fast enough, right? Like it's in terms of the word content, I'm 100% with you. I find it almost offensive because it's like, what, I'm just filling a vessel somewhere. Like Facebook has made a vessel, TikTok has made a vessel, and I'm just like, just taking a piss in it. Like it just is really an awful term. And it actually, it just strips the artist of like agency and meaning and the things that, you know, you and I value. And I think for good reason. But, you know, I think back to like, if you look at Shakespeare, I love this conversation about low and high art, because Shakespeare was sort of popular cultural food back then. It was like popular. And now to us, it is this like absolute, you know, pinnacle of the mastery of the English language. But then I look at something like West Side Story, which is the Romeo and Juliet story, all of the touchstones of that drama, all of the perfect moments where the drama intensifies, where the stakes get higher. It's a template for a film. It's a template for a novel. It's a template for an excellent, truly airtight, really brilliant arc of a play where characters change, where drama intensifies, all these things, right? You put that to West Side Story. So it's in a modern context with modern gangs in the streets of New York City, still the universals, right? Still the love stories, still the people categorizing each other and hating each other for these, you know, ridiculous superficial reasons, and like family tensions and revenge and all of those things that are timeless.
Yeah.
And you put that story in that modern context and it still rings with this universality that affects us all. And I mean, like, that is my favorite musical of all time. And is it because of the drama and the seamlessness and perfection of it? Possibly. I mean, it's also Bernstein and what's his face, Sondheim, and I love the dancing and all of these other aspects. But it has been put into a 20th century world and maintained itself, maintained its strength, its power, that its life force is still there. So I feel like analogous things are going to happen with all this new media. Of course, stuff falls away, right? Of course, you know, lesser artists will not last. And right. Maybe some that are not deserving will last, right? But the universality and the potency of a well-created story, or even if it's 30 seconds, and this is the thing I try to wrap my head around. I was like, really? 30 seconds? Like, okay. Yeah. But if there's that potency there, if there's that universality there, it will resonate. And I think that is maybe not the defining feature, but a strong defining feature of art.
This idea of resonance is interesting because the argument you make about Shakespeare being pop culture, it's predicated on the fact, it's predicated on an understanding of the intelligence of the audience as well. So like the artist, it's an equilibrium that's struck between artist and audience. Like, you know, let's go back to the days of Shakespeare. Had the audience been less interested or less intelligent, he would have been more obscure. Am I right?
Interesting. I don't know. Would he have been? And presumably the people, like, I don't think the people going to those plays were all literate. You know, like, I don't think they were all, I think they understood when people were in love. They understood when people were angry. They understood where people were in situations where they had to choose between family and love and all of these things. And they understood the comedy, right? But I don't know if they were appreciating the elegance of the language. Who knows, right? I mean, I'm sure some scholar somewhere knows, but I sure don't. But I, you know, like, I read an essay by T.S. Eliot that I actually tell all of my friends who I speak to on this level. I say, like, this is the thing that you read and your soul will be at peace forevermore with your own art making. It's called Tradition and the Individual Talent by T.S. Eliot, one of the greatest to ever wield the pen. And he describes in this in this essay, something you were alluding to with the European understanding of that long trail of cultural legacy, right? Like, and they bring that to the ritual of going to the opera or whatever. He says a similar thing about when you endeavor to work in any medium, any artistic medium, is to feel that the canon, to place yourself in the canon, to respect and acknowledge in every time you pick up the pen and look at the piece of paper, the canon itself, right? The long tail. And it doesn't even have, I mean, like in North America, there's still a long tail. It's not, centuries old, but there's still a legacy. You are still on the shoulders of giants, right? And just reading that, I was like, this makes sense to me. I value the artists that have gone before that I respect, that I consider part of my lineage. I value their contributions. I feel like it is bordering sacred to me because I feel like that's what they were doing, right? Like when I was mentioning they bring us to life, there's a sacred element to that. There's almost a religious element to it, right? It's like to bring you to the sanctity of being, to deepen your understanding of what it is to exist. That's what I love about the artists that I feel have gone before me and that whose lineage I build upon. So I acknowledge that in what I do. And I say, to hell with whether it resonates with the culture, whether it makes money, whether it does any of these things. And I know that's grossly impractical, but that is what I need to feel like what I'm doing has meaning.
Yeah, I feel like we have to still, as artists, code ourselves in these intentions, at the very least, just to galvanize against that sort of opaqueness that we are kind of leaning into in the 21st century. Is that like, and two, sort of we've entered into a business that routinely knocks you down and humbles you, if not humiliates. So I feel like I've got this yogurty covering of this intention, this intensity and intention, so that I can feel still that I can guard that sense of importance in how I feel about what it is I'm putting out in the world. Like you, popular culture had a massive impact on my life. It's my reason for being in so many versions of myself that I understand. And my contribution, my want to contribute to that long line, especially as Canadians, because we do feign that humility, like, oh, I don't really belong here, and oh, I'm not that important, and oh, I'm not really that great, and oh, shucks, oh, me. Yeah, it's always driven me crazy, that feigned humility that Canadians do. Well, this is so boring to continue to have to play this part, because at the end of the day, what I really want to do when I go into a studio or go into a writing session or go on stage is believe that what I'm doing is important. Like,
100%. Yeah.
How wrong is that?
It's not wrong at all. That's what I love about you. I mean, it's part of a long list. Everyone knows. But yeah, I 100% agree. Like, until we as artists go, no, what we're doing is valuable. I know it. The people going to your shows, buying your records, being moved by what you make, they know it. The people that have stayed with you for 2+ decades clearly know it. You are adding something of real value to their life. And unless we act like it, like, what's the point, right? Like, I believe that. I 100% believe that. I would not be invested in making a musical over what's like 6 years now, barely getting paid, like, but wanting so badly for this story to be told, to contribute to this art form, to really show what I can do, right? Like, have you seen the Danish film Babette's Feast?
Yes.
Right? Okay, so there's everybody listening to this, go watch it right now. Like,
I should in the last couple of months, it was on an airplane that I was on.
Oh my God, I could watch it 10 times. There's a speech in it that I've actually transcribed in my diary, and sometimes I look at it. But there's the moment near the end of the film where this woman who's like ended up on this remote Scandinavian island, she's from Paris, she's like trained as this like a very, very high level chef, and she's in the middle of this like rural remote outpost somewhere in northern Scandinavia. Highly related. Yes, and the details are not important, but but there's last scene where she was gonna, for all of these like old biddies and like the old minister and like the people in town, like, you know, the locals, there's like, I don't know, 8 of them at the table. She wants to prepare this feast, and she assembles, like through sheer will and determination, the finest that she can find, and she prepares this like work of art, wine pairings, and like everything is exquisite down to the last detail. And she says, I think this is like very near the end of the film, she says, all an artist wants to do is let me show you what I can do. Let me show you, right? And I'm just like, oh, I can see goosebumps, right? And I think that's what we all want to do. Like to me, there's a deeply spiritual element of it. It's like God force in you wants expression. It wants expression. And why? To celebrate its own self and its narcissistic ego exercise? No, it's deeply spiritual. It's connective. Let me show you myself so that you can see yourself, right? Like Joni Mitchell talks about this all the time. People used to like sort of derogatively describe her as confessional. And she'd be like, this song isn't about me. Like when I do this in a song and I give you all of this intimacy and these details, it's not about me. It's about you, what you hear in what I'm telling you about myself, right? It really is deeply spiritual. It's connective.
I mean, I couldn't agree more, Sarah, honestly. And I mean, I'm loath not to talk about spirituality, and I'll air quote that because, of course, it's big and that's a spooky thing. And
we talk about it all the time, though. Let's do it.
Easy to dismiss. And I think, especially given our modern lives, spirituality, it's a more cumbersome concept, I believe, than it used to be. And I believe that because we're moving to, the mantra these days in the mainstream, which I don't invest myself in too much, but the science mantra to me is sort of a secular mantra. And I feel like if you follow the science, to me is saying that it's an anti-spiritual messaging. That's how I've been absorbing it. And for me, I'm like, yeah, thanks for this. But I mean, I believe science insofar as physics and divine mathematics and going into the metaphysics, which you so thoughtfully introduced me to. And really in the last year, a year ago around now, you and I were on the phone because I had fallen apart. Literally, I was the lowest I'd ever been. And really, it's been this last year of deep spiritual, a rewrite, a rethink, and a reintegration into something that feels far more authentic and real, and possibly it's not on display in the window of the 21st century as this is what we're all doing and thinking. Like, I'm looking now, holy smokes, how far back do I have to go to where the real wisdom exists? Like, are we talking pre-dynastic Egypt? Are we talking before the Ice Age? Like, where do sophisticated humans and thinking and our sentience and our want for love? I'm sorry, but I'm not buying the story that I was told in school. I feel like there is a history and an intensity to this that I'm reevaluating and investing in. And a year ago, to almost to the day, you and I think both pulled ourselves more or less off of social media. I think we both, in some ways, over a telephone call, agree. Like, we just kind of stopped listening to the news. Like, we have to invest in the loving version of our inner selves, and not this sort of hateful version of our outer selves, which is being advertised to us in a way that I'm put off by, because I see it fundamentally as a human species self-loathing. And I'm like, man, we are a divine creature here. And this want to dislike everything we do and everything we think and everything we want for. I'm like, while I came from this misanthropic place and spent a lot of time marinating in it over the years, it's not who I am anymore. And man, I am really spooked out to think that I ever believed that. Because going back
now, but it's never who you've been. It's falling into a state. I feel like that's what it is. And I almost feel, I mean, sometimes if I think about this too long, I almost feel like it's by design, that all of this apocalyptic, hateful, divisive rhetoric on all kinds of subjects that we are literally drowning in constantly. It's everywhere you turn. It's almost like you can't escape it. I feel like it's by design. It's meant to kind of reconfigure our self-perception as, limited by identity politics, limited by, nature out there is big and terrifying, and we're like, the little hopeless, powerless pawns. And if you just recycled, everything would be okay. And it's just like you can't be immersed in that and not start to question everything and feel totally powerless, totally disconnected. And I feel like the reason it feels so bad, because it does feel so bad, if you go too far down that lane and think about, the injustice, the very real injustice that is out there, the very real assault on our planet, if you think about all of these things, you can start to feel like that, worm that is going to turn to dust very quickly. And that is not, I feel like it feels so bad because it's not true.
Yeah, man.
It's not true. And I don't talk very much. I try to always mention my connection with art and spirituality and how deeply I think they're interwoven in every chance I get, because I feel like that's what most people intuit. That's why they go to concerts. Yes, there's the entertainment aspect. Like, I want to get away from life for a bit. That's like the Bieber song, or like, something that's going to be a little vacation from life. But for the most part, I feel like people are nourished by art. They go to it to be fed, right? And that's no small thing. That is no small thing. That is a deeply spiritual thing. We are, as you say, I believe this, like, beyond a shadow of a doubt, we are divine. There's something divine in us, the divine center that as the body ages and you look in the mirror and you go, oh my God, look at me. When did I get 46, right? Like, there's a center in you that is timeless, that is eternal. I sing about this all the time. And I not only intuit, I feel like I know it in a way that I don't know anything scientifically. Science is a huge boon to society, obviously. Like, no one's going to argue that, right? And we need it as a species. We need to collectively assemble around things that are true, right? So that we can figure out how to move matter around and how to care for our bodies and all these things, right? No science, no bypass surgery. No science, no all the things, right? That are great for modern society. But there's a philosopher I love by the name of Thomas Nagel. And he said that objectivity, this concept that is so central to science, empiricism, and all these things, like this objectivity, right? He calls it the view from nowhere. And isn't that true? Who is doing the looking from an objective standpoint? No one. We are immersed in consciousness. We are nodes of consciousness. We have our individual consciousness, but consciousness, in my view, permeates reality, right? So there's no, this is why science is constantly evolving, constantly changing. The truth that it once held to so firmly, like this is objectively true, erodes as time goes on, and the truth gets reassembled, refined, tweaked. This has been happening since the beginning since the Enlightenment, right? So
well before,
precisely, right? So we have to think about science in that way, as this moving, living thing. And we have to think about reality as pure consciousness.
Amen, Sarah Slean. And I'll say this, in my big deep dive since last August, looking at Pythagoras and that the derivation of science, it was given birth to through the lens of philosophy. And as soon as I sort of got this sort of Pythagorean conundrum on paper and saw that, I was instantly put at ease, because it's like, yeah, like this is when my gut starts to go, yeah, like this is because seeing that what we lack, I think, writ large in the 21st century is a philosophical standard or a philosophical base. When I look at everything that I'm told that I'm supposed to feast on from the mainstream, without question, I'm like, yeah. But I'm an individual and a fairly smart person, and I've been some places, and I have sort of moved through this world on my own steam to some degree. And while it's interesting that you'd like me to buy this wholesale without questioning, it's just not who I am. And through the lens of this Pythagorean understanding of that philosophy begets science, then I'm like, whew, okay, now I'm ready. Now and I think really this is kind of what I meant about going back, like into the ancient wisdom, into these things that were sort of quietly moved through the epochs, away from the potential destruction of the mainstream. It doesn't want new ideas. It doesn't want like these mystery schools that had to go underground, including Pythagoras, because as soon as it's aired out in public, it's like, the people come and they destroy this Pythagorean school. And it is really, it's difficult to brush up against the mainstream in that way where you want to authentically question it. It's dangerous stuff, and it feels dangerous to this day. And I think in some ways, when you and I were on the phone a year ago, I was really afraid of that danger. I'm not afraid of things. It's so weird what's happened in the years since we've talked. I mean, you gave me Neville Goddard, right? For me, my guy is Manly P. Hall, who oddly enough was born here in Peterborough.
Me too, yeah.
And so these sort of, how do you pigeonhole this? Do you call it occult? Do you call it?
No, I don't. I call these are not new ideas either. Like
ancient,
they're very old ideas. And the concept that human knowledge has been doing a constant ascent is actually not true at all.
And
right?
It's that we embody that idea. Like, look at this. 3 colors of toothpaste in the single tube. It's like, aren't we the best we've ever been? It's like, whoa!
Peak civilization. No, I mean, it's amazing. iPhones are amazing. Air travel is amazing. Space travel, like these things are like incredible, and advancements are clear, right? Like they were not, but at the same time, like
we've abandoned
massive knowledge, really heavy, huge knowledge about metaphysics and the nature of reality was being poked at centuries before, and constantly. I really do feel like there's an eternal nature to reality. There's a now, like we only exist in the now, but we have this sense of time being serial and unfolding in this straight line.
Yeah.
But there's Neville, who has all kinds of fascinating ideas, but again, reiterating a lot of old Eastern ideas, says like reality is so huge that for a tiny little biological creature like us, we experience it serially, but it's all concurrent.
Yeah.
It's all, reality is finished and huge and here in an eternal now. The people in India have been saying this for centuries. People in India have been saying for centuries that reality is pure consciousness, that matter is consciousness, that everything you see and experience in the world is consciousness. They've been saying that for ages. Right? These are not like wacky, Christian Science. Like they're not wacky ideas. It's philosophy.
It's weird that we have to now that we're up against this wacky ideas thing, because the more I invest in my spiritual life and the more I read and the more I go way, way back, the more magical and awesome in the literal sense life becomes, the more excited.
Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. Hawk, I feel the same way. That's why I love you.
I'm so bloody excited to be in what is truly an awesome fucking story. A story that could be 35,000 years old, could be 100,000 years old. We just don't know this stuff. And we've been locked into a conventionality around our thinking and the way we understand the last 2,500 years of sort of relevant modern human history. And I'm thinking, oh boy, that doesn't get me excited to live. But when you consider our magical selves, our spiritual selves, ourselves that once could operate interdimensionally, interplanetarily, our selves that were truly, we were inhabitants of an infinite universe and we knew it. And I feel like now the trolling, the everything that in our life that diminishes, that seeks to devalue our judgment, devalue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, from a commercial standpoint, you sell stuff to people who are unhappy. So going back to what you said, that a design aspect to life, it's like, yeah, our unhappiness has been designed into our life, because if we were happy people, we are shopping less. We are investing less in a material life. If we are happy, it's probably because our inner landscape, our inner lives are put together and succinct. And without...
Preach, brother.
Hey!
I'm taking it all in. Keep going. Whoa.
And I mean, I even sort of feel like with this podcast, like I'm easing my way in. Ultimately, this is the direction I want to go in. Ultimately, I feel like I'm talking to cultural figures and comedians and people like this because they're my people. But I'm moving in the direction of wanting this discussion. Ultimately, as I figure out a way to gracefully move in towards this direction, also not wanting to alienate people, because really we are very, very invested in our modern selves and our secular selves, our materialistic selves. And it's the ego bristles easily if you start to push against some of the architecture around what feels to me to be a potentially inauthentic way of being, or a not entirely real way of looking. So this spiritual pursuit that I'm on, I do want to have an invested discussion about it out loud, because I feel like if I was this blue and this devastated, yeah, just be alone in that. And there's an inordinate amount of confusion to reckon with. And I think, is it my artist's heart? Is it your art? Is it our artistic instincts that we want to do battle with? And I use the word battle just so that you can visualize the dalliance between this thing and our. What am I trying?
I love what you're saying, and I feel like I'm going to interject and say, like, I feel like the major movement, the major shift that I've experienced lately is there is nothing to fear.
Yeah.
There is no, I don't believe in a source of evil. I believe that there is love / God / consciousness, whatever you want to call that, intelligence. I believe there is that, and its shadow, its absence, where its light is not shining for whatever reason, because that human ego is blocking it out, because human fear is blocking it out, because who knows, isolation, a disconnection that is seemingly engineered into our cultural society. Think about Instagram, right? Think about people referring to themselves as brands.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is me and that's everyone else, right? And people being so invested, myself included, right? Like, we feel like we have to do this. We have to participate in this, like,
highly individualized
egoic parade, this construction of selves, an edifice, a buttressed, protected, guarded, built, constructed personality that excludes, right? That me and other. And it's poisonous. It is poisonous, because what feeds us as human beings is the remembrance, and that word is deliberate, the remembrance that we are one and the same phenomenon, that nature and life and whatever this exquisitely divine thing is that on one planet starts to flower and produce people with minds, the most complex supercomputer in the known universe, billions of them. That pure divinity is one. And this is so old. I mean, ancient Eastern ideas, but also ancient Judeo-Christian ideas, right? Like, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
Yeah.
These are so old. Some people knew it and understood it. And it's almost like the way religion wields sexuality. It's like you take this real elemental thing and you beat people over the head with it, and you try to make them like disconnected and take them away from that spiritual link. And it's like, that's what's happening today. You know, like, you're not connected, bam, bam, bam. You have 12,000 followers and this person has 6,000. You know, it's like, it's so messed up. And the remembrance that we are one is part of our responsibility as artists, right? To create things that recall that in people, right? That's when I am sitting in front of a person who is singing from their heart, or has like performing in an orchestra, or like doing something beautiful that speaks to me. Like, I weep. I openly weep. As you say, you were weeping at the opera. This tradition of calling, it recalls to me Emmanuel Levinas, another one of my favorite philosophers. Not in the school of Neville Goddard, more of an academic philosopher, but he was a French philosopher who said he had this whole theory of the face, the human face, being this force that calls from within, calls to us, the recollection of our origins, right? The beginning of us, which is like timeless, eternal, right? That a face, that relation only can do this. You're not going to feel that and know it in a vacuum, looking at your phone, looking at your Instagram feed. You're not going to find it. You find it looking in the eyes of the other, who is different on these superficial levels, and on the deep and profound and meaningful level is inseparable from you, who is literally you, and you are them.
100%. I mean, this has been my entire universe for the last year. I mean,
I can't wait to hear what you're going to make.
I mean, I've been, I mean, the gist of, I think that where this comes together in an easy to digest and poignant way is the Kabbalion. Did you read the Kabbalion? The all is the mind. Again, it's pure Neville Goddard. It's pure, these old power brokers of the internal, like, magic machine, like, we need more of this.
That could not be the title of the next record. Power brokers of the magic machine.
Well, I came up with one of my, when you and I yak, because I came up with the less, actually.
Keep a pad around, because like, that's gold.
You were like, that's an album title. So it is an album title. Maybe this is an album title. This is my everything. This is almost complete eradication of irrational fear. Now, I'm not saying that I've moved into 100% dominance, but my fear of death, which has driven me my entire life, seemingly gone. My fear, my generalized, the fear that always feels like has me hunkered over, has me never standing up straight in my sort of version of myself. I just don't see, I feel like it's completely gone. Now, does this coincide with like aging and, a backing off of testosterone, all these wonderful things that you in middle age that give you a little bit more internal space to consider things other than your ego. But honestly, I feel like had this been painted for me 15 or 20 years ago, I may have understood it then too. I'm not sure if just this is just where I am in the dance procedure with the universe. If I couldn't have come to this any sooner, I'm not sure. I feel like in going through all of this, it's like, yeah, I knew all this stuff in that way that like I got an old thing rattling around inside this vessel that you had said this earlier, like that empirical knowing, and then there's the other kind of knowing. And I always have had a lot of knowing that I don't know where any of it comes from. It's like, geez, why do I know this stuff? I don't know. But between the ages of 47 and 48, reading through this ancient spiritual wisdom, I'm like, okay, what the cellular activity at the pit of my gut has been shouting in my general direction. This is what it's been wanting me to move in the general direction of for so long. It's insanity.
Yes. It calls us. This is the beautiful thing about life/love/God, whatever it is. It will never stop calling. It forgives and forgives and forgives. And finally, the prodigal son turns around and goes, I guess I'm going to go home. And he's welcomed with open arms, no matter what he's done, right? No matter how long he's been away, no matter how many mistakes he's made along the way, how many crimes, how many foolish, hateful things he's done. He comes home, open arms, right? And I mean, I think most of these holy texts, don't mean to offend anyone, but I feel like they're all fable. This is the power of stories, right? To me, it's completely irrelevant if there's any angle of historicity to them. In fact, I kind of don't think there is, but like it's irrelevant. The power of the fable, the power of the wisdom in those stories is so transformative. And I don't just mean the Judeo-Christian tradition. I mean many, like if not all of the religious traditions in the world. They're dealing with that wisdom. They get co-opted by people who in their fear, their disconnected fear, want to manipulate it in order to control people and to have more power, because we're all saddled with these like fears that we are just small humans and not divine creatures. But the wisdom is there. As you say, it's been there all along, and it will never stop calling to us all. That is the hunger that we all feel, the loneliness, the isolation, the hunger. And that's why we go to art, why we go to nature, for the real food.
Sarah Slean, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for being on the Stumble Forward. Bless you. Continued inner success.
I love you, brother. I always will.
Take care, Sarah.
The Stumble Forward is an Isadora Media production and is hosted by Hawksley Workman and produced by Jennifer Kavanaugh. Be sure to subscribe and follow The Stumble Forward. You can support the podcast at patreon.com/Hawksley Workman. Thank you for listening.
Stumble forward, the stumble forward.